morning to try the coffee in the back corner in the metal air pots. Yeah? What do you guys think? Good? Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. So we are a caffeine-conscious coffee company, and that means we're on a mission to bring exceptional coffee to coffee lovers who just don't want all the caffeine. Now, my personal journey began with decaf a few years ago. I was living in Chicago, working at a pretty stressful job. I was working for Bain & Company, which is a management consulting firm, and I was spending extremely intense hours doing private equity due diligence. And on top of that, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And so as you can imagine, that was a really stressful time in my life. But on top of that, what made it even worse is that I realized that the coffee that I love, the caffeine in it, was really impacting my health. It was augmenting my stress and really preventing me from sleeping. And so as a longtime coffee lover and a former barista, actually my first job was at Boston Stoker as a barista quite a few years ago, the thought of giving up coffee was just not really an option for me. So I switched to decaf because I wanted to improve my sleep and I just didn't want to give up my coffee. But I quickly realized decaf sucked. Has anybody here had a bad cup of decaf coffee? Yeah, lots of hands. And the reason that most decaf is bad is that it starts with lower quality beans, the majority of which are chemically decaffeinated. And those chemicals can add that metallic taste you sometimes taste in your cup. On top of that, rather than just being forced to drink bad coffee, I hated the way that the coffee community tried to make me feel. I faced judgment from a lot of baristas who gave me that look of like, what, you want decaf? What are you thinking? And at the same time, I even had people just straight up tell me, you're not a real coffee lover if you're not drinking it for the caffeine. I totally disagree. I think people who drink for the flavor and not the caffeine are actually the real coffee lovers. So, all right, excellent, thank you. Now, for that reason, I started Savorista, to serve caffeine-conscious coffee lovers like myself. To get started, my husband Daniel and I traveled to Colombia and to East Africa to really explore what goes into crafting an exceptional cup of decaf and low caffeine coffees. We visited with producers and decaffeinators and tested hundreds of coffees. The culmination of that journey is the beginnings of our line of caffeine-conscious coffees. Right now, we have 4 what I like to call shockingly great decafs. They're made with exceptional beans, decaffeinated with natural ingredients like water, and we roast them fresh to order after our customers place their order on our online shop. Next up, actually first I should say, and we've had great feedback. People tell us they love this is the best decaf they've ever had, the reviews on our website are exceptional, and our customers are regularly telling their friends about us. And so next up for us, later this fall, is a line of low caffeine coffees for people who, maybe they want less caffeine, especially in the afternoon, but they might still want a little bit. So we're going to serve their needs later this year as well. And we see excellent products as the foundation of a brand that celebrates caffeine consciousness rather than stigmatizes. We're looking to shift the way that people think about low caffeine and decaf coffees from something that is a valuable addition to your day, especially in the afternoon or in the evening with a great pastry, and not something that's a punishment for being caffeine sensitive. Now, through this journey, I realized I am not alone. There are 30 million people who drink decaf at least once a week. If you want to know more about later who's drinking decaf, happy to share more there. And so when you narrow that for specialty beans, that's $1 billion market. But what I think is even more exciting is the overall health and wellness trends. Consumers are telling us over and over again that they don't want to choose between feeling their best and savoring the products they love. We see that in gluten-free and dairy alternatives, and even in the recent celebration, actually, of alcohol-free beer and mocktails. I think caffeine is just at an earlier stage of that journey. And I believe that because 2/3 of consumers say they should limit their caffeine intake. Now, there are 110 million people who drink coffee every day who say they should limit their caffeine intake. But only 30 million of them drink decaf at least once a week. So there are 80 million caffeine-conscious or caffeine-interested consumers who aren't being served by coffee. That would be over a $2 billion market opportunity. And I think low caffeine is really interesting is because lots of people make half calf on their own. Has anybody here ever made a half calf mixed a decaf and a regular? Exactly. So between coffees that grow with lower caffeine as well as exceptional half calf blends and some other ideas, I think low caffeine market is a place where we can really create new offerings for caffeine-conscious coffee lovers. So most decaf, as you probably know, is sold by more caffeine-focused coffee roasters. Typically, they have one offering, maybe a variety of dark roasts, but not, not a wide portfolio of a variety of different exceptional decaf coffees. Now, recently, we're seeing a growth in the decaf trend. There have been a couple locally focused micro roasters that have popped up in the West Coast and in Canada. And they seem to be focusing on this as a fun part-time job and not necessarily looking to scale, from what I can tell. Savorista, on the other hand, we're aiming to be the household name in caffeine-conscious coffee. And we have really strong initial traction. We've sold in most states in the US and 2 additional countries, Canada and Madagascar. For most of 2019, our revenue has grown 50% month over month. Our most recent survey, we had an 83% NPS, so Net Promoter Score, people who love our product and would recommend us to a friend. And those are captured in some of our raving fans like John, who's from Dayton, who has proclaimed himself the president of our fan club. Now, to achieve our mission, we need to launch new products like the low caffeine coffees, as well as I think there's some great opportunities in ready to drink and premium single serve options. And we'll need to expand beyond our existing online shop to specialty cafes, high-end hospitality, and eventually extreme specialty retail. So we're building and have built so far the beginnings of an incredible team to begin to capture this opportunity. As I mentioned, I spent 3 years at Bain & Company working in industries like retail, consumer products, private equity, and a variety of others. But most importantly, learned how to learn quickly and ramp up and lead a team to make decisions in ambiguous circumstances. And speaking of ambiguous circumstances, my entrepreneurial journey actually began in the Peace Corps, where I lived in Burkina Faso in West Africa, and I worked with farmers to help them build an agricultural co-op and access export markets. Leslie is our marketing, insights, and sales lead. She brings with her almost a decade of experience in marketing and branding for specialty foods and retail. And Taylor, through her company Tailored Social, is taking on increasing levels of our social media to help us with our presence in the world. So our asks for you today are, first, check us out. Follow us on social media. We're at Savorista Coffee. After this, experience us in the back. Give us a try, even if you don't typically think of yourself as a decaf drinker. And if you know someone who has been looking for a great decaf or just wants to reduce their caffeine a bit, tell them about us. You can be that friend that finally helped them find excellent coffee that didn't have all the caffeine. And on the other hand, we'd love you to help us learn faster. We're at the early stages of an exciting journey, and the more conversations we have, the faster we can grow. We'd love to speak to people who have built and scaled CPG companies, even better if they have some experience in e-commerce. Also, early next year, we're looking to raise a seed round, and we'd love to talk to people who could help us learn more about fundraising and how to do that well. And finally, as I mentioned, soon we want to expand into cafes and restaurants and other venues beyond our online shop. If you have thoughts of who we could speak to for not necessarily sales, but even as a starting point, a learning conversation, we'd welcome those as well. So thanks so much. I'll stop here, and I look forward to your questions.